Hello, beautiful people. The peace of our Lord be with you. After such a long while, I'm happy to be with you once again, even though we are again meeting on this rather unfortunate topic. These terrorists are Muslim. This is a very important and relevant topic, and I believe I owe it to myself and humanity to see it to the very end. Isn't it apprehending that those that the world would dismiss as cheap criminals have become emboldened in recent days, whether in Nigeria or Mali or the Arab world that is the birthplace of these menace? You see terrorists not just challenging national military formations but also going ahead to maintain an ideological presence on social media space. That video you just watched is a propaganda video that is released by the media arm of a terrorist group in West Africa during the last Eid al-Fitr celebration. That is one video that brings tears to my eyes. You know, watching the arrogant display of bombs, arms, and ammunition used in, snuffing out the lives of women, children, Muslims and non-Muslims. Why a melodious Allah Akbar playing in the background tears my soul apart. This shows that terrorism is a much deeper issue than we are willing to concede, and it behooves every Muslim to stand up to condemn terrorism in its entirety. That is the right attitude, and we should not be like, for instance, like Kamzat, who, when taunted with terrorism, took it with his full chest. No, that is not the right attitude. Can we now say that is the reason he was whooped and Sean Strickland defeated him? No, let's not be petty. But actually, the right attitude for Muslims is to condemn terrorism and not to wear it like a pendant. Now, let us pick it from where we stopped the last time. Let us set out an argument that will defeat the terrorist narrative. Please stay with me. It's your quintessential poster of peace, your one and only Alpha Moses. Yes, in my last episode on this topic, these terrorists are Muslim, we set out to come up with an argument as moderate Muslims to build an argument that will defeat the argument of the terrorists for unconditional perpetual violence regime change. And to be able to do this, I make the case that we may need to look beyond the life of our dear Prophet Muhammad. That was when I gave the example of Prophet Yusuf. We can learn from the history of Prophet Yusuf that as believers, we are allowed to live freely under a secular government. Not just that, we are also allowed to use our God-given knowledge to help that regime or society to succeed. You see, having said that, in our present world of today, one of the greatest edict of Islam is democracy. Because frankly speaking, democracy is a disbelief. And I believe in my earlier analysis of Quran chapter 5 verse 44 to 48, I've been able to establish that. So you can see that in Nigeria, as election is drawing near, many Muslims are at a dilemma as to whether to participate in the process or not. They are at a dilemma as to whether they should be seen, whether it is appropriate that they should be seen as further entrenching this democracy that has been adjudged as kufu. So you see that many Muslims, they are under a mental torture when they try to participate in democracy. They are like, am I even sinning against God or not? So I believe by the time we now apply the life history of Prophet Yusuf, we will see that if indeed we are believers who believe not just in Prophet Muhammad but believe in other prophets of God, we will see that we are allowed to freely live under a secular government. Not just living under a secular government, we are also allowed to flourish under that government and even participate and use our God-given knowledge to help the government and the society to succeed. Because frankly speaking, there is nothing you accuse democracy of that you will not find in the government that nurture Prophet Yusuf to prosperity. So that is why I am appealing to my fellow Muslims in Nigeria that we should free ourselves from that mental shackle, from that mental bondage that when I participate in democracy, I am actually sinning against God. No, because God does not lay a burden on a soul more than he can bear. And since we have found ourselves in a world where democracy is the order of the day, we have seen from the life history of Prophet Yusuf that we are at liberty to live freely under such a government, to flourish, and even go ahead and participate in that government, to become an official in that government, just like Prophet Yusuf became a vice, or what do they call it, a prime minister under the government of Pharaoh, as long as our faith is not being persecuted. So we are free as Muslims to join democracy and participate fully in it. You see, because of the nature of the topic, I have tried limiting myself to Islamic sources. But if you are a believer whose roots proudly extend beyond Saudi Arabia like myself, then one other example we can give that will further reinforce our argument against terrorists who would blackmail moderate Muslims with democracy is the example of Daniel and the three boys. Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they were, believers under a very secular government, and they participated fully in that government. They were so beneficial to that government that they were promoted to high-ranking positions. This will further, show you that as believers, we are at liberty to live freely under a secular government, and we can even participate in that government as an official. Where you draw the line is when you are being forced, you are being called upon to bow down to idol. That is when you draw the line, or when you are being persecuted for your faith. In the case of democracy, are we being called to bow down to idol by force? No. Are we being persecuted because of our faith? No. So you are free as a believer to flourish under such government. Dear viewers, I have given us two examples. We examined the life history of Prophet Yusuf. We also discussed Daniel and the three boys at Babylon. If you are a Muslim who do not believe in the Bible, you can at least identify with the history of Prophet Yusuf in the Quran. That is purely Islamic, and it cannot be denied. So let me give us one other Islamic sources that is pertinent to this discussion. It is the story of the boys in Surah Al-Kahf, Quran chapter 18, that fled persecution from a non-theocratic government to go and hide in the cave to practice their faith. It is important to note that God did not punish them. But if you apply the argument of the terrorists, it will look as if it is expected of these boys to actually take arms and ammunition against the state and start shedding innocent lives instead of actually fleeing from that government. The lesson there for believers, the lesson there for Muslims is that one of the options available to us whenever we find ourselves under a non-theocratic government is actually to leave that government and go elsewhere where we will be comfortable to practice our faith. You see, that is a better option for us instead of taking up arms and ammunition against innocent lives, against innocent people in our environment. How much more in a democracy where nobody is persecuting you for your faith? How much more in a democracy where you are at liberty to practice your faith? You will see that there is no excuse for shedding blood. There is no excuse for this wanton destruction of lives and properties as it is being practiced by terrorists today. That's it, brethren. It has been a wonderful session. I wouldn't want the video to be any longer than this. Please, if you recollect, in my last episode on this topic, I presented a table that summarized the evidence that terrorists cite to justify their wicked act of terrorism. And today we have been able, to do justice to the first part of that table. We have been able to diffuse their violent interpretation of Quran chapter 5, verse 44 to 48. In the next episode on this topic, we would go further, to do justice to other part of their evidence likewise. Please, until then, live with your neighbor in love, spread love in your workplace, embrace your Christian dad, hug your Muslim mom, be good to the whole of humanity. We are blood brothers. Shalom.